Okay, so final segment, what do we got?
So episode 8, segment 5, and we mentioned before some of the right-wing podcasters that are going around at these colleges and stirring up trouble. And anyways, there was an episode recently where Charlie Kirk, as Steve puts it, got his tushy handed to him, and so we wanted to bring that up just for shits and giggles. And,
Okay, so he went to Cambridge and got his ass handed to him. So we were talking about how this guy's never going to debate anybody, who's got any chops, and he fucked up and did, and found out. So yeah, he went to Texas A&M, and he's dealing with these clowns who have no education to begin with, and they're brainwashed, and a lot of these kids are from the military that go there. Is what I found.
And they're screened on top of that.
And they were screened, and half of the show was just them, stroking his ego and stuff, and there was really no debate going on. There was a couple kids who were trying to get a debate in, but they just didn't have the chops of these Cambridge kids. These kids are coming, these kids are ready. One of the girls who went up there is actually a debate, was a international debate champion, and just put him to shame. But I think this might end up being one of these cases where anybody who's understands logic and logical fallacies and logical inconsistencies, and understands straw man arguments and all these other different types of like I said, logical fallacies and cognitive distortions, and all these other things that happen in debates or in discussions, would recognize that this guy's just out of his league. He's gone. Like, he just sounds like a moron. He just got his ass handed to him in every discussion that I saw him on. The professor took him to task on Ukraine. He was taken to task on taxes. He was taken, the one kid that was up there, and he was asking him about, well, do you know which country in Africa is having a civil war? Sudan, I know. Then he's like, well, what about Myanmar is having? He knew the fucking answers. He's like, unlike you, Charlie. He said, I know what's going on. Like, I'm not a culture warrior like you. And he's like, you're selling yourself out to the lowest, He's like, you're an idiot.
And what's really sad, though, I just thought about with guys like what you were saying with Charlie Kirk, is this is what they're trying to do for a living. And it wouldn't take more than 20 minutes a day for them to actually get themselves up to date with some real facts, but they don't bother.
But here's the thing. He doesn't care about facts. He doesn't even understand logic. He doesn't understand facts. The guy dropped out of community college, right? So, and I'm not saying that doesn't mean he can't be smart. But
my point is, he's not trying.
He's not even trying.
His goal is not actually to educate people. His goal is not to find the real truth. His goal is not to really actually help people. His goal is not...
His goal is to push an agenda.
Yep.
Like the kid said. You're a culture warrior, and you don't care about education. And I said that in our first segment about this clown. He shouldn't be in an institution of higher learning because he doesn't care about truth and learning. He's there, as you said, as a propaganda mouthpiece for bullshit. I think you didn't phrase it that way, but...
Yeah, no, I mean, he's one step removed from like a Jordan Peterson. And the only thing that makes...
Well, in a worse way.
Well, yeah.
Because at least Peterson at one time was an academic.
Well, the only thing that makes Peterson worse is that he's really good at obfuscating his whole message to the point that you're not sure if he's saying anything at all.
Right.
Which helps, because then if you actually agree with him, you latch onto the nasty little bits.
He's gotten to a point where, and we'll get back to Charlie.
Sure.
But he's gotten to a point where he, used to be, pretty solid in his early days. And I looked, before he went off the
So how early was early?
Over maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, when he was a legitimate Harvard professor, and wasn't in trouble over there and had to go to Canada. That's where he was from, right?
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
But anyways, whatever. If I got this wrong, go in here and tell me what's right. But he had problems, and he had to go up there, and then he had problems there. But because he went off the rails, man, and started talking some real nonsense. But at one time, he was a legitimate guy, had some legitimate ideas, and he got a little bonky. But now, I mean, he's literally flipping stuff. Like, if his explanation of what Nietzsche was trying to say, or he's always
exactly the opposite.
Yeah, he flips Jung upside down. He's like, somebody was talking about how he had, Hitler, or should we say this, I guess, on this?
Well,
but he was having, this Nazi stuff on his walls and everything. He's like, well, as Jung would say, you got to go into the dark to, you got to do that shadow work. And it's like, no, that's the shadow of them. You're supposed to go into your own shadow.
Yeah, but
like the shadow work is...
You can read up on that stuff without plastering it on your wall. I mean,
not only that, but that's not shadow work.
Right.
That's just like being creepy.
Yeah.
It's like the shadow work is about you. and your darkness and recognizing the darkness within yourself. Not about the darkness in him, the darkness in you. Recognizing the darkness in you and not acting like that. So how is looking at his darkness going to help you? Like, anyways, these get so shit flipped every time. So if he's talking about Nietzsche, if he's talking about Jung, if he's talking about, Dostoevsky, he likes to talk about a lot, just reverse what he's saying, and that'll be what's really trying to be said. So anyways, you look in the darkness of him. No, it's about you, dude. So anyways, so reversed, once again, reversed.
Yeah.
So it's back to Kirk. Yeah. So he gets his ass handed to him, and, he made a fool out of himself, but he's not debating. And he can't, I don't know. I don't know where to go from there. It's sad because we have to take a look at these guys, and they're such a heavy influence, and people do take them serious. Like this is, part of, education or anything like that. And it goes back to this education thing and about critical thinking skills, and discernment and understanding when someone, is just pushing an agenda and when they're trying to garner truth, like you said. So why he would even be in a university is...
Well, in the case of A&M, it's because he happens to share largely the agenda of that particular university. But
right.
In other cases, I struggle more to answer that question.
I think Cambridge took him there just to show him he's an idiot.
Yeah.
And I told you, and I didn't tell you, but I said it when we had the first one. If he ever went up against anybody with any chops, he would get schooled, and he did.
Yeah.
But of course, and here's something that's disheartening. That if you went into the right, media feeds, that there would probably be comments saying Charlie won.
Of course,
Charlie won. There was a debate way back in the Wallace and MLK or something back in '60s in Alabama. That's the dude's name, right? And there were people saying, he won. Martin Luther King lost. Wow, man.
Well, I mean, to bring it more recent, I mean, any of the presidential or vice presidential debates from 2024, the idea that Trump or Vance won,
even close.
It wasn't even close. Maybe giving him a benefit of the doubt. 1 point from one debate. There was something about Tim Walz's education where he misspoke slightly, but that's about the most that you can say. I mean,
but so what?
But so what? I know, I agree, but
it's a false influence.
But it's similar to what you're saying, where I can't possibly see how they can think that way, but there are people, like you said, who are going to be so far into the sauce that
it doesn't matter. They see what they want to see,
Well, and then when they start to break out of things, they just shut down. Like I've seen it.
They do. We talked about
what I really hate is people like, again, I hate bringing them up in some ways, but at the same time, it's a perfect example. My own parents, where I'm starting to realize that little things that I maybe saw when I was younger have been there all along. Like with my mother, the key thing is avoidance.
Yes.
Like if it's emotionally charged at all, she distances herself from it. And one thing I didn't realize that, we had pets growing up. We had dogs, not really cats, but dogs. Right. So, they get to a certain age and you got to put them down or whatever. She would never be one of the people who went to the vet to be there when the animal got put down. Mm-hmm. Never. Yeah. Not all
because if you're not there, it doesn't exist.
Right. But, and I've been in there, and it's not a pleasant experience, but the idea that you would extricate yourself from that part of life. I mean, she has gone to funerals, so it's not like she's completely avoidant of death altogether. But you get my point.
I'm gonna say a couple things on that.
Sure.
And then we'll tie it back to Charlie Kirk, and then we'll wrap this up.
Cool.
But life. Look, especially and we've talked about this environmental narcissism and everything else, and it goes back to what I'm talking about. But it doesn't matter where you grew up. There's no healthy household in this world, like in this society that we're living in.
There's better and worse.
There's better and worse, of course.
Yeah.
There's degrees, right? But none of it's healthy. It's, that thing I told you about. It's no measure of health to be, well adjusted to profoundly sick society.
Right.
So everyone's, damaged in some way, shape or form. And, life, there's going to be suffering. And the vast majority of it is man-made or self-inflicted. You're causing your own suffering in one way or another because of your way you're reacting to things or, not dealing with things in certain cases. So you have this suffering. That's, the Buddhist talk, life is suffering, and that's just it. And you're going to have to, right? And there's things that are inevitable in the chaos of the universe and things. There's going to be tornadoes and stuff like that. But some of this other stuff we can kind of help each other out in different ways. It's hurting each other. And there's two different paths that generally people will take. And you mentioned one, avoidance. So, certain individuals to alleviate suffering, anxiety, and depression and things like this, they'll become addicts in a certain way. And, some go after money, some go after sex, some go after drugs, some go after this or that and different types of drugs. So this is all coping skills and mechanisms to alleviate some of this suffering and this pain. And some people just get, of course there's going to be addicts who get hooked on something simply because they got prescribed some pills, and then once the pills are out and they're fine. But if the underlying cause is the suffering, then they're going to have some adjustments.
Then eventually you have to deal with the suffering,
right,
otherwise
and
you solve the
understand
problem.
where it's coming from and why, and adjust. So. Now and I wanted to talk about how this goes back to your parents about this avoidance. So what ends up happening is people who don't, whatever reason, there might be predispositions, in the brain and things like this, but for whatever reason, they're just not, they don't go down that route and they become avoidance. And you see a lot of people like this. And these are the people that often get mistaken for narcissists, because in a narcissist, the motivation is, and I know I'm going deep into it, but the motivation from the narcissist is a little bit different than the motivation from the avoidant, but the behavior is very similar.
Right. If you're not careful, you mistake one for the other.
Right.
Yeah.
But internally, they're sometimes a narcissist can be even malicious. And then, then you're under, and I don't believe in good or evil, but I believe that certain things cause more suffering, and certain types of suffering that are derived from certain ideas and are more harmful than others. And I give more, for whatever reason, I don't know if I'm thinking this through clearly, but for whatever reason, I can give more grace to a person who's just avoidant than I can to somebody who's narcissistic. I don't know why. Maybe I just...
In as much as there's a difference, I would agree with you, yeah.
Yeah, I can just kind of see the point there. That, they just can't do it because their brain can't handle it. So what's happening in society right now, and I told you this is about the discombobulation in the feelings that people are having right now as things start to change so rapidly, is their whole worldview is deconstructing, and all this guilt and shame and all this things about they thought about themselves is too disorientating and too painful, so they avoid it. And they just don't want to think about it. They don't want to think about it, and they don't want to deal with it.
It's
a very in the old days. Put it on the rug.
It's a very regressive thing. I think that's why they like the term MAGA, because it's very regressive.
Let's go back.
Again,
I don't have to face it.
Again, trying to analyze my own family structure, and I realized a lot of things that I thought of as being very woke, they are, but that's not what they associated themselves with, because that was the last iteration that I was aware of, and they're still fixated on the first iteration that they were associated with,
right?
Which are two completely different things.
Right, it's advanced so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, they. So when an individual's worldview is being shattered, and their sense of self, their sense of community, their sense of society, religion, all these things are being deconstructed. They just want to crawl back in the hole and not face it, and they're in denial. They're gaslighting themselves. So that's why they lash out their guilt and shame onto you. And they vote for somebody like Trump. And then they try to justify it with absolute nonsense because it's so clear what this man is. But yeah, this goes back to Charlie Kirk then. Why would somebody believe in this crap that he's spitting out, even though it's evident that he can't have a rational debate with anybody who's critical thinking skills? Because they just can't.
If they don't themselves have those critical thinking skills, then among other things,
and
they don't even recognize the lack of those skills if they don't know what they look like.
Right. So you're right. It's two-pronged. One is, and then this is the really disheartening thing, because your parents are what, scientists?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my dad had physics, and then my mom had a degree in math, and they both worked on the same code, and yeah.
Right. So these are smart people.
Yeah.
But in the traditional sense.
Right.
this is very hard, but it doesn't mean they can think critically on every level.
About every issue.
About every issue on every level, especially these emotional issues, where
As I put it, I'm pretty sure they have been voting Republican since Nixon, with the exception of Ross Perot back in 2000, and
Right.
yeah, that's about it.
So these are emotional gut things that these people are, and they're trying to hold on to something, some idea of themselves and society, and this American mythos of American exceptionalism, the founders myth, all these things that they can't let go of. And you nailed it. Some of these people are just they're not vicious, they're not malicious, like I make it sound a lot of times, they're avoidant and they don't want to face reality. And you present it to them, they're going to recoil. Or they're going to get mad at you and call you the crazed one when you're just trying to make things better for everybody. So I think we can wrap it up with that.
Yeah.
So I don't know, anything you want to say?
I guess just the thing that I've been telling people left and right recently is just pace yourself. Things have gotten nasty, and they're not going to change anytime soon. And until they do, you want to be involved enough that if somebody brings something up, you know what they're talking about, and you want to be distanced enough that you're not losing your freaking mind. And so if that means that you limit yourself to an hour a day of looking at news, great. And if that means you limit yourself to once every other day, it depends on who you are, and it can change too. Maybe you're feeling one better one week, or maybe some issue. You get the idea. But take care of yourself is all I'm saying, really.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to doom scroll, as they call it, I guess. And,
yeah.
And I find myself doing it from time to time, but I try to stay abreast of the news. And I know in the past couple of weeks, I've actually, been pretty good about staying away from it. To a certain extent, not even on purpose, just being busy doing stuff.
That's the best way to be.
Right. And look, if things are not gotten to the point where I don't even have to think about it, well then it's not all bad.
Well, and like I said, if it gets to the point where there's some big thing, like look at the beginning of this video for a big thing, you get the idea.
Right.
But if there's some big thing and it comes up and I'm like, oh my God, that happened 4 days ago and I didn't hear about it. Okay, maybe I'm a little bit too out of the loop.
Right.
But unless that happens, you're doing fine. Is what I'm saying.
Well, and what we're talking about is trying to maintain your own mental health.
Right.
But we're not trying to say minimize the situation.
No, by
no means don't minimize it. You have to be screaming in the streets, but take care of yourself. And first and foremost, you can't help anybody if you're crumbled up in a corner because you've exhausted yourself. But you can see it. I don't think I've been as animated in any of these videos as I was today. It is taking its toll on me, I guess.
And I'm not gonna. I say I'm not gonna call him out by name, but I don't remember his name. There's one guy on TikTok who talks about, I'm gonna tell Trump to fuck you and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not saying that.
Right.
But there's a degree to which you're shooting yourself in the foot, and you know where that line is. But for yourself better than I do, nobody should be pushing you up to that line. Like there are certain social media platforms, for example, where I feel like I can say anything, and others where I feel like I need to maybe pull back a little bit. Just
think about it.
If you feel like you can't say anything anywhere, that's a problem. But that doesn't mean you should say anything everywhere, and then lose monetization or have people knocking at your door or whatever. Don't use your brain. There was some other point I was trying to make.
Yeah, I mean, tailor your conversation.
And you're probably already doing that. But if you're not already,
don't compromise your integrity.
There's a thin line though between compromise and trying to create a scene and.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not saying what was those skits? Keeping it real goes bad. Like sometimes keeping it real goes bad. Like
it's like the bird biscuit place. Like your comment about we're not going to walk in there and start filming there because you never know who's going to be listening, and just a bit of common sense.
Right. If it doesn't have to get to there, why make it? You know,
Yeah.
why instigate? Don't instigate anything.
I mean, it's like online. I'm not going to walk into Magaspace and start having a conversation with people.
But
Offline, I'm not going to.
This is going on a little bit longer than I wanted
Sorry.
to, but I'm going to kind of delve in this real
Sure.
quick. But like, you know, you have to think about like, when am I losing my integrity by just not saying something, by not putting my foot down? You know, like, man, like I'm going to do this. I'm just not going to say something for $1.
Oh no! I'm not
You know what I'm
telling
saying?
anybody to do that either. It's
Right,
it's
like-
just there's that.
I got to do this just so you know. Just so like I don't starve, you know. But I mean, in some cases, maybe you
Yeah.
do. I don't know. Like that's such a personal thing. But I question myself sometimes. You know, like you said, it's tough, man. Because sometimes I'm going too far, and sometimes I'm not going far enough.
I guess my point here's what I was actually getting at, because it was sort of in response to the one guy that I mentioned. His attitude was, "Oh, fuck all these guys. You shouldn't have to worry about it." No, if you need to worry, you need to worry.
Yep.
Don't take my word or his word or anybody else as a reason why you should or shouldn't say your piece. Just be careful about it, and I guess I'll leave it at that.
So yeah, I guess the final word would be take care of yourself.